What's up, y'all? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we're gonna talk about all things abs. A lot of people will tell you abs are made in the kitchen, and that's partially true, but abs are also made in the gym. So we're gonna talk about all of your core movements and some good exercises for you guys to incorporate to make sure that you're getting a really strong, well-rounded core and that you're doing all of those exercises correctly. So let's get started. Influencer on the internet has their 6-minute ab routine that they'll give you, and that's all well and good if you just want a good burn. But you want to think about your core training and your ab training the same way you do your other muscles. So you want to be able to progressively overload the exercises that you're doing. If you're not able to progress them, you're probably not going to be making your core any stronger. So the exercises that we talk about today will have very clear progressions so that you know that you'll be progressing. Your core controls 4 different movements. You've got flexion, extension, lateral flexion, and rotation. So we're gonna go over all 4 of those movements and what exercises you can select to make sure you're covering all of those bases. Spinal flexion is the rounding of your spine. And the most common spinal flexion exercises you'll see are probably crunches or sit-ups. So as you can see here, I'm getting rounding of my spine this way. When I lift my chin and roll up off the ground, the same goes for your sit-up. Those 2 exercises are not maybe my first picks. They're good for beginners, but I really like a lying leg lift on a bench because as you go, you can bring the incline up on the bench to make it more difficult, and then eventually you could add weight as you get better. Like I mentioned, you're gonna start this on a flat bench. You wanna hold on to the bench behind your head, and you're gonna start by lifting your knees up like you're trying to tuck them into your armpits. And then you wanna roll down with control. And the goal here is to get as much spinal flexion as you can and control the movement, both going up and down. In order to make this more difficult, we're gonna bring this bench up to a slight incline. Obviously, that's gonna make it more difficult for me to lift my legs up, and it's also gonna make it more difficult for me to resist on the way down. So the higher you go, the more difficult it'll be, but I actually like this better than like a hanging leg raise because the angle is going to give you more engagement in your abs the whole way through rather than being straight up and down, because eventually gravity is just going to do its thing and you're not going to have any resistance on your abs. And then once you get to a place where you're pretty high up here, you could put a weight on your feet and make it even more difficult for you. The next movement we're going to talk about is spinal extension. This one you won't see as much because you deal more with the erectors or your back. We're gonna go over Supermans, which is a pretty simple one that you can do from home, but another that I really like is a 45-degree hip extension or a back extension is a really good option if you have that machine at your gym. You also will see more commonly anti-extension exercises. Think a plank or any type of plank variation where you are resisting spinal extension, and we'll go over that after the Superman. So the Superman, you're just gonna get down and you're just gonna start with your arms up overhead. You're gonna start fairly relaxed, and then from there, you're basically gonna turn yourself into Superman by lifting your hands and lifting your feet as high up as you can, trying to engage these lower back muscles, and then relaxing down. So we're up. You should feel your back turn on right away, and then you can relax down. You can hold that for probably like 20 to 30 seconds, and you'll feel a good back engagement there. In terms of anti-extension, there's a lot of really good options here, but the most basic is your plank position. So by anti-extension, I mean we're resisting this movement. So that's where your body wants to go when you get into this position. So the reason we're working our core here is you are resisting extension in your back or in your spine. So what we want to think about in our plank position is shoulders over our elbows, feet about hips width distance apart, tight quads, tuck your tail and squeeze your butt a little bit. And as you can see, my hips and shoulders are in a straight line, and that's what you want to keep throughout the whole plank position. In terms of progressing that, you can do a long lever plank. You can do a weighted plank where you put a plate on your back and add a little weight to that. A long lever plank looks like this, where you'll walk your feet out, and it's just gonna make it more difficult for you to maintain that anti-extension. So your hips are gonna wanna drop here. Next, we have lateral flexion. Lateral flexion is gonna be that side to side bending movement that is primarily gonna involve your oblique muscles, the abs that kind of lay on the side here. And one of my favorite exercises for actual lateral flexion is a lateral side bend. So we're gonna hold a weight in one hand and we're just gonna kind of bend side to side. So you're just gonna keep your arms straight, keep your chest tall, and you really wanna focus on getting that side movement. Try not to cave forward. You're gonna stay fairly tall with your chest and just reach that weight as far down as you can. Feel a good stretch along the opposite side, and then you're gonna squeeze back up to a standing position. And just like with anti-extension, we also have anti-lateral flexion, which the most common version of that you're gonna see is a side plank. So if you come into a side plank position, you'll be on your forearm, stack your feet either on top of each other or one in front of the other. And then when you lift your hips, that's what you're resisting, is that lateral flexion there. So if you hold up and you resist gravity, this is going to be anti-lateral flexion. The last movement we're gonna go over is rotation, or the rotation of your trunk from side to side. The most basic exercise that you guys have probably seen for rotation is a Russian twist. So you'll start with a med ball or a plate or a dumbbell, any type of weight, and you're gonna bend your knees and just barely lift your heels up off the floor to start. You can even start with your heels on the floor if that's a little too difficult for you. You're gonna start with the ball at your chest, and then you're gonna rotate from side to side, reaching that ball across your midline and trying to tap it on the floor each time. Last, we have anti-rotation. So now we're gonna resist that rotational movement. We'll start with a band, and you can kind of hook this onto any stable surface. You could also do this with a cable machine. You wanna hold onto the band with both hands, and it should be pulling parallel with you. You're gonna take a step out until you feel some resistance in that band. You wanna hold it right the middle of your chest. Feet should be about shoulder width distance apart, slight tuck to your tail. You can have a little bend in your knees, and you're just gonna press that band out away from you. And you're gonna pull it back and forth, or you could just hold it out here. And over time, you can just increase the resistance of this band or increase the weight on your cable. One thing that you wanna think about through all of these exercises is keeping your transverse abdominis engaged, which is gonna be that muscle that kind of wraps from your spine all the way around to the front. And if you ever notice when you're doing core exercises that your belly makes like a little cone shape or a little dome shape, that probably means that you're not engaging your transverse abdominis properly. So what you wanna think about doing is pulling your belly button in toward your spine and kind of flattening your belly out as much as you can. In any core exercise, that should be the goal, to have a fairly flat belly. That's all for today, guys. Thank you for joining me. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and you can find me at Kelly L. Matthews on Instagram and TikTok. I'll see you guys next time.